My name is Clara Torres. I'm 38 years old. The last time my family saw me, they thought I was living out of my car, probably shooting up in parking lots behind strip malls. That was 2 years ago, at my cousin's wedding. I had driven 16 hours from Denver, but I walked in wearing ripped jeans, work boots that had seen better days, and a flannel shirt that looked like it came from Goodwill. Not because I couldn't afford better, but because blending in had become survival. They didn't know those boots were steel-toed tactical gear. They didn't know the flannel was flame-resistant and had hidden pockets for surveillance equipment. They didn't know I'd just finished a 6-month undercover operation that took down a methamphetamine ring spanning 3 states. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The wedding was a nightmare. Mateo, my older brother, the responsible one with the accounting degree and the mortgage, pulled me aside during cocktails. "Clara, you look tired," he said, his voice heavy with that particular kind of concern that felt more like pity. "Maybe it's time to think about getting some help." I said nothing, let him believe I was the family disaster. In my line of work, being underestimated wasn't just useful, it was camouflage. The truth? I was a DEA special agent, level 12. For 8 years, I'd infiltrated drug operations, dismantled trafficking networks, and gathered intelligence that kept poison off the streets. But to them, I was still the kid who got arrested for shoplifting at 17. The daughter went to rehab at 19. The sister who couldn't hold down a job or maintain a relationship. They thought I was broken. And that day at the wedding, watching Mateo's wife whisper to my mother while they both stared at me, I realized something that made my stomach turn. My own family had turned me into their cautionary tale. But I didn't know yet how deep that narrative ran until the call came 3 days ago. Dad was gone. Heart attack at 62, sudden and swift. The wake would be at the house in Austin, the same house I hadn't set foot in 2 years. Now I sat in my rental car, a dusty Camry that screamed down on her luck, parked 3 houses away from the address I'd memorized as a child. Through the windshield, I could see the warm light spilling from the living room windows, shadows moving back and forth like a domestic ballet. Neighbors I recognized were walking up the front path carrying casseroles and flowers. Mrs. Garcia from next door paused at her mailbox, talking to someone I couldn't see. Her voice carried on the evening air. "Such a shame about Roberto. And Clara, well, I heard she's been having a rough time. Marisol won't talk about it, but you know how mothers protect their children." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Even the neighbors had adopted the narrative. Taking a deep breath, I checked my appearance in the rearview mirror. Oversized hoodie, check. Jeans with a strategically placed hole in the knee, check. Hair unwashed for 3 days to sell the illusion, check. I looked exactly like what they expected. A woman who'd lost her way, coming home because she had nowhere else to go. The irony burned. 6 months ago, I'd received a commendation from the deputy administrator himself for my work on Operation Clean Sweep. Last month, I testified before Congress about cartel infiltration patterns. Tomorrow, I'd probably be back in the field, wearing a wire and pretending to be someone's girlfriend while gathering evidence that would put dangerous people behind bars. But tonight I was just Clara, the disappointment, walking up to a house full of people who'd already decided who I was. The front door was unlocked. I slipped inside, hoping to avoid the initial wave of awkward greetings, but the living room was packed. The hushed conversations didn't exactly stop when I appeared, but they shifted like a radio being tuned to a different frequency. Mateo spotted me first. His face went through several expressions: surprise, discomfort, and finally that familiar look of resigned concern. He made his way over, weaving between clusters of relatives and family friends. "Clara?" He hugged me, and I caught the brief hesitation before his arms closed around my shoulders. "I wasn't sure you'd make it." Dad deserved better than an empty chair, I said simply. Mom's been... He glanced toward the kitchen, where I could see our mother, Marisol, bustling around in her black dress, playing hostess with the determined energy of someone trying not to think too hard. I knew exactly how she was. Marisol Torres had built her identity around appearances, around what the neighbors thought, around maintaining the image of a family that had their act together. My very existence threatened that careful construction. "She's avoided looking at me since I walked in," I observed quietly. Mateo's silence was confirmation enough.
Aunt Rosa approached then, her face creased with the kind of sympathy that felt more like obligation. "Mija," she said, reaching out to squeeze my hand. "I'm so glad you're here. Your father would have wanted his whole family together." Behind her, I caught sight of two women I didn't recognize, clearly family friends, whispering behind their hands. One of them glanced at me and shook her head almost imperceptibly, the way you might look at a stray dog that keeps showing up in your yard. "I think I need some air," I told Mateo. He nodded, understanding. "The backyard's pretty quiet. Mom set up some chairs out there." I made my way through the house, past photographs of family vacations I'd missed, past awards Mateo had won for his accounting firm, past a life that had continued without me while I'd been busy protecting people who would never know my name. The backyard was indeed quiet, just the distant hum of conversation from inside and the soft rustle of the oak tree Dad had planted when we first moved here. I sat in one of the lawn chairs Mom had arranged in a semicircle, looking up at stars I'd forgotten were visible in Austin, and tried to remind myself why I was here. Because he was my father. Because despite everything, despite the years of silence and the weight of their assumptions, love didn't just disappear. It got buried, sometimes deep, but it didn't die. My phone buzzed. A secure message from Special Agent Park, my handler. "Check-in, status report by 0600 tomorrow. Stay low profile." I almost laughed. Low profile. If only he knew how low my profile had become in my own family. The evening air was cool against my skin as I sat in Dad's old lawn chair, the metal frame creaking under my weight the same way it had when I was a teenager, sneaking out here to smoke cigarettes I'd stolen from Mateo's jacket pocket. Back then, this yard had been my sanctuary. Tonight, it felt like exile. Through the sliding glass door, I could see the wake continuing without me. Relatives clustered around the coffee table where Mom had arranged photos of Dad, his Navy service portrait, the picture from their wedding day, shots of him coaching Mateo's Will League team. I wasn't in any of those displayed photos. The message was subtle, but clear. I was scrolling through work emails on my secure phone, half listening to the muffled conversations inside, when two voices from the kitchen grew louder, close enough to the open window that their words carried clearly into the night air. "I appreciate you coming tonight, Carlos," Mom's voice, formal and strained. "Roberto always respected you." "Marisol, you know I'd be here. He was a good man." The responding voice belonged to Chief Carlos Alvarez, a family friend who'd been around since I was in elementary school. He'd been the one to drive me home the night I got arrested for shoplifting. He had also been the one to lecture me about wasting my potential when word got around about the rehab stint. "I'm worried about Clara being here," Mom continued, and my blood went cold. I set down my phone, every nerve suddenly alert. "She seems quiet enough," Chief Alvarez replied. "Hasn't caused any trouble." "Yet." Mom's voice dropped, but the window cracked open, and the sound carried perfectly into the night air. "Carlos, you have to understand. I haven't seen her in 2 years. The last time she showed up looking like she'd been sleeping rough. I don't know what she's capable of anymore." My hands clenched into fists. I forced myself to stay still, to listen. "What are you saying, Marisol?" "She's been on the streets. God knows what kind of people she's mixed up with now, what kind of habits she's picked up. We had to cut her off completely. She was asking for money, claiming she needed it for rent, but you think she was using it for drugs?" "I know she was." Mom's voice cracked slightly. "My own daughter, Carlos. Roberto's baby girl. And now she shows up here tonight looking like she hasn't showered in days. What if she causes a scene? What if she's unstable? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. There was a pause. When Chief Carlos Alvarez spoke again, his voice had shifted into professional mode. Do you want me to keep an eye on her? I could stay close, make sure things stay calm. Would you? I can't bear the thought of her disrupting Roberto's memory. He loved her so much, despite everything. But the neighbors are already talking, and David's family is here. David, Mateo's brother-in-law, whose opinion apparently mattered more than mine. I'll handle it, Chief Alvarez assured her. Discreetly. If she steps out of line, I'll suggest she might be more comfortable leaving. Thank you. I know it's a terrible thing to say about your own child, but I honestly don't know what she might do. She's been gone so long, living God knows how. She could be dangerous. Dangerous? My own mother thought I was dangerous.
I sat in that lawn chair, staring up at the oak tree Dad had planted, and felt something crack open inside my chest. Not heartbreak. I'd moved past that years ago. This was something colder, sharper. This was the moment I understood that my family hadn't just written me off, they'd actively rewritten my story, turning my absence into evidence of my failure, my secrecy into proof of my shame. They had no idea that my sleeping rough look had been carefully crafted by DEA wardrobe specialists. They didn't know that the money I'd asked for had been part of a cover story to explain why I was liquidating assets before going deep undercover. They couldn't fathom that my absence from family gatherings wasn't because I was shooting up in some alley, but because I was testifying in federal court, or briefing senators, or sitting in surveillance vans for 18-hour stretches. My phone buzzed again. Another secure message from Park. Intel suggests possible cartel surveillance in Austin Metro. Exercise extreme caution. I may need to extract you early. I stared at the message, feeling the weight of irony settle on my shoulders like a lead blanket. Here I was, worried about cartel surveillance, while my mother was inside telling the police chief that I was the dangerous one. The sliding door opened, and Mateo stepped onto the patio. "Hey," he said softly, settling into the chair next to mine. "You okay out here?" "Fine." I tucked my phone away. Just needed some quiet. He nodded, then cleared his throat in that way that meant he had something difficult to say. "Clara, I want you to know that whatever's been going on with you, whatever you've been dealing with, I'm here. We're family." I looked at him sideways. "Are we?" "Of course we are. I know things have been hard for you. The job market, the economy, finding stable housing. There are resources, programs that can help people get back on their feet." "Programs?" "Counseling, job training. I could even help with the cost if insurance doesn't cover everything." There it was. The same assumption, delivered with brotherly concern instead of motherly shame, but the assumption nonetheless, that I was broken, that I needed fixing, that I was one social service away from becoming a productive member of society again. "That's generous of you," I said, keeping my voice level. "I mean it. You're smart, Clara. You always were. Remember how proud Dad was when you got that full scholarship? My daughter's going to change the world," he used to tell everyone. Mateo's voice grew wistful. "Maybe you still could. It's never too late to start over." Start over. As if the last 8 years of my life had been some extended detour instead of exactly where I was supposed to be. "I'll think about it." I lied. He patted my shoulder, satisfied that he'd done his brotherly duty. "Good. That's all any of us can do, right? Just keep trying." After he went back inside, I sat alone in the darkness, listening to the gentle murmur of voices, the occasional laugh, the sound of people remembering a man they'd all loved. My father's voice seemed to echo in the night air. My daughter's going to change the world. He'd been right. I had changed the world, one case at a time, one operation at a time, one dangerous person removed from the streets at a time. But he died not knowing that, thinking I was the family failure, the daughter who'd never lived up to her potential. And whose fault was that? Mine for choosing a career that demanded secrecy, or theirs for never bothering to look deeper, for taking my silence as admission of guilt? My phone buzzed a third time. This message was different, marked urgent. Possible threat escalation, recommend immediate status change to protective detail, acknowledge receipt. I stared at the screen, feeling the weight of the decision. I could acknowledge the message, let Park extract me from the situation, and disappear back into the world where I was Special Agent Torres, where my badge carried weight and my word meant something. Or I could stay, endure another night of pity and whispers and assumptions, and let my father be buried while my daughter remained a stranger. But there was a third option, one that I'd never considered until this moment, sitting in his backyard, listening to my mother tell the police chief that I was the dangerous one. The house had settled into the rhythm of a proper wake by the time I came back inside. The initial awkwardness of my arrival had been absorbed into the larger flow of grief and memory sharing, and most of the guests had migrated to the dining room, where Mom had laid out enough food to feed half of Austin. I lingered near the hallway, watching clusters of relatives I barely recognized share stories about Dad's coaching days, his time at the hardware store, his famous barbacoa recipe that he'd never written down. These were pieces of his life that had continued without me, chapters in a book I'd been edited out of.
Clara? Mateo appeared at my elbow, holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed me one, and I accepted it gratefully. The ceramic mug was warm between my palms, a small comfort. I was just talking to Aunt Rosa about you. Oh? She mentioned that her church has a really good outreach program. Job placement assistance, temporary housing, that kind of thing. He kept his voice low, considerate of the other guests, but I caught the way Mrs. Delgado glanced over when she heard housing. Nothing traveled faster in a Mexican family than the suggestion that someone needed charity. That's thoughtful, I said, taking a sip of coffee to buy myself time. I could drive you over there tomorrow, if you want, after the funeral. Father Martinez is a good guy. He used to counsel kids who got in trouble with the law. The irony was so sharp it was almost funny. Father Martinez counseling troubled kids, while I'd spent the last 3 months posing as a troubled kid myself, infiltrating a drug ring that recruited from local high schools. I appreciate the offer, Mateo, but... He interrupted gently. I know it might feel like charity, but there's no shame in getting help when you need it. We all need help sometimes. Behind him, I noticed that our conversation was drawing attention. Aunt Rosa had paused her story about Dad's fishing trips to listen. Cousin David was pretending to read the sympathy cards, but obviously straining to hear. Even Mrs. Delgado had angled herself closer to our corner of the room. This was what my family had always done, turned private struggles into public spectacles, wrapped in the language of concern but performed for an audience. The thing is, Mateo continued, warming to his subject, you're still young. 38 isn't too late to turn things around. Look at Miguel. Remember Miguel Herrera from high school? He was dealing drugs for 5 years before he got clean. Now he's got his own landscaping business. Good for Miguel. I'm just saying, rock bottom can be a foundation to build on. And you've got advantages. You're smart, you're educated. Once you get stable housing and maybe deal with whatever underlying issues led to... He gestured vaguely at my appearance. Led to what exactly? He blinked, suddenly realizing he might have overstepped. I mean, the lifestyle, the instability. I'm not judging, Clara. I'm just saying there are people who can help you figure out what went wrong and how to fix it. What went wrong? As if my entire adult life had been one long mistake. Mateo, I said carefully, what exactly do you think happened to me? He shifted uncomfortably, glancing around to make sure we weren't being overheard. We were, but he didn't seem to notice. Honestly, I think you got overwhelmed. College was intense, the job market was tough when you graduated, and maybe you just couldn't handle the pressure. It happens to smart people sometimes. You burn out, you make some bad decisions, and before you know it, you're in a spiral. A spiral. I'm not trying to hurt your feelings, he said quickly, but Clara, look at yourself. When's the last time you had a permanent address, a steady job, a relationship that lasted more than a few months? Each question hit like a small slap. The answers, if I could give them, would have been, I move every 6 months for operational security. I've had the same job for 8 years and I'm damn good at it. And my last relationship ended because I couldn't tell him why I disappeared for 3 weeks without warning. I know it might feel like charity, Mateo continued. his voice taking on the patient tone of someone explaining something to a child. But the first step is acknowledging that you need help, and we want to help you. Mom's been worried sick, even if she doesn't always show it the right way. Worried sick about me being a drug addict. Worried sick about me causing a scene. Worried sick about me embarrassing the family in front of Chief Alvarez and the neighbors. What kind of help do you think I need? I asked. He looked relieved that I was finally engaging with the conversation. Well, obviously housing is the immediate concern. Then maybe some job training. I could probably get you an entry-level position at my firm. Nothing fancy, but it would be steady income while you get back on your feet. Entry-level. At an accounting firm. After I'd spent the morning reviewing financial intelligence reports on a money laundering operation that stretched from Tijuana to Toronto. And there are programs for people with addiction issues, he added softly, if that's part of what you're dealing with.
What makes you think I have addiction issues? The question seemed to surprise him. Well, I mean, look at you, Clara. The way you've been living, the way you look, the fact that you've been out of touch for months at a time. Mom said you asked her for money last year and she was afraid to give it to you because... He stopped himself, but it was too late. Because she thought I'd spend it on drugs? She was trying to help you by not enabling you, he said desperately. It's called tough love. Sometimes you have to let people hit rock bottom before they're ready to accept help. Rock bottom. I almost laughed. Last month, I received a personal commendation from the DEA administrator for my work on Operation Desert Storm. I owned a condo in Denver and a cabin in Colorado. I had more money in my savings account than Mateo probably made in a year. But to him, I was at rock bottom because I looked like I hadn't showered in 3 days and drove a beat-up rental car. I appreciate your concern, I said finally, but I'm not sure you understand my situation as well as you think you do. Then help me understand. Talk to me, Clara. Tell me what's really going on with you. The plea in his voice was genuine. For a moment, I was tempted to do exactly that, to pull him aside and explain everything, to show him the badge I carried in my inner pocket, to let him know that his sister wasn't a failure, but a federal agent who'd risked her life to keep drugs away from kids like the ones Father Martinez counseled. But my phone was buzzing again, and I could see Park's name on the screen. The cartel surveillance wasn't theoretical, it was escalating. And if I revealed my cover to Mateo, even with the best intentions, how long before he shared it with Mom? How long before Mom shared it with Chief Alvarez? How long before word got back to the wrong people that Special Agent Clara Torres had been in Austin, vulnerable and exposed? It's complicated, I said instead. He nodded as if this confirmed his worst fears. I know. But whatever you're mixed up in, whatever kind of trouble you're in, we can figure it out together. You don't have to face this alone. Trouble? Mixed up in something? The language of assumption, painting me as a victim of my own bad choices, rather than someone who'd chosen a difficult path in service of something larger than myself. I need to take this call. I gestured to my phone. Of course. But Clara, he caught my arm gently as I turned to leave. Promise me you'll think about what I said, about getting help, about letting us help you? I looked at his face, earnest, concerned, absolutely certain that he was offering salvation to a sister who desperately needed saving. Behind him, I could see the rest of the family. Their conversations paused just long enough to catch our exchange, their expressions a mixture of pity and curiosity. I'll think about it, I promised. As I walked toward the empty laundry room to take Park's call, I caught a fragment of conversation from the kitchen. At least Mateo's trying to reach out to her. Someone has to. I closed the laundry room door behind me and answered the phone on the 4th ring. Torres? Clara? We've got a problem. The surveillance isn't just possible anymore, it's confirmed. 2 vehicles spotted near your location within the last hour. We need to discuss immediate extraction. I sank onto Mom's old washer, suddenly exhausted by the weight of living 2 lives that couldn't coexist. How immediate? Tonight, if possible. Tomorrow morning at the latest. I know this isn't ideal timing, but no, it's perfect timing. What do you mean?
I looked through the small laundry room window at the backyard where I'd sat listening to my mother call me dangerous, where my brother had just finished explaining all the ways I needed to be fixed, where my father's memory was being honored by people who thought his youngest daughter was a cautionary tale about wasted potential. I mean, it's time to end this. The operation, the cover, all of it. But not the way you're thinking. Clara, what are you planning? I smiled for the first time in hours. I'm planning to give my family exactly what they've been asking for, the truth. The laundry room smelled like fabric softener and old grief, the kind that settles into the walls of a house where someone has died. I sat on top of Mom's ancient washing machine, phone pressed to my ear, while Park's voice cut through the static of a secure connection.
Clara, I need you to listen carefully. We've identified both vehicles. Black Escalade with tinted windows parked 2 blocks east of your location, and a silver Honda that's been circling the neighborhood for the past 45 minutes. These aren't curious neighbors. My blood chilled. How did they find me? We're working on that. Could be facial recognition from traffic cameras, could be someone in the organization piecing together your background. The important thing is they're here, and you're exposed. Through the thin laundry room door, I could hear the murmur of conversation from the wake, the gentle sounds of people sharing memories and comfort food. My father's friends and family gathering to honor a man they'd loved, while predators circled outside in the darkness. What's the extraction plan? I asked. 2 options. We can have you out of there in 15 minutes, create a diversion, get you to a safe house, and have you on a plane to Denver by midnight. Clean break, no questions asked. And option 2? We bring in a tactical team, secure the perimeter, and arrest anyone who makes a move. But that means turning your father's wake into a crime scene. Media, police tape, neighbors with cell phone cameras. Your cover gets blown, and your family gets pulled into a federal investigation. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of 8 years of secrecy pressing down on my shoulders. 8 years of missed holidays, avoided phone calls, and careful lies to protect the people I loved most. 8 years of letting them think the worst of me so they'd never have to know the dangers that came with my work. 8 years of letting them think the worst of me so they'd never have to know the dangers that came with my work. There's a third option, I said quietly. Clara, I'm done, Park. I'm done living 2 lives. I'm done letting my family think I'm a failure while I'm out here risking everything to keep their world safe. And I'm especially done hiding in laundry rooms while cartel surveillance teams threaten the people I love. The silence stretched between us, filled with the kind of understanding that comes from years of working together. Park had been my handler since my 2nd year with the DEA. He'd seen me through operations that had broken other agents, watched me disappear into cover so deep I sometimes forgot who I really was. He knew me better than my own family did. "What are you thinking?" he asked finally. "I'm thinking it's time my family met Special Agent Clara Torres." "That's not how this works, you know that. Operational security, need to know. The operation's compromised anyway. If they found me here, my cover's already blown. But instead of running away like I always do, instead of disappearing and letting them make up more stories about where I went and why I left, I'm going to tell them the truth. Clara, this isn't just about you anymore. We've got 18 months of intelligence, sources in 3 countries, and a federal task force that depends on your cover identity. If you blow this, I'm not blowing anything. I'm ending it, on my terms, for once in my goddamn life." Another pause. When Park spoke again, his voice had shifted into the tone he used when he was talking to Special Agent Torres instead of to Clara, the screwed-up daughter from Austin. "What do you need from me?" I smiled, feeling something loosen in my chest for the first time in years. "I need backup. 2 agents, full tactical gear, and my badge, the real one, not the cover identity crap." "When?" 20 minutes. "And Park? Make sure they understand this isn't an arrest. It's a family reunion." After I hung up, I sat in the quiet laundry room for a few moments, gathering myself for what was about to happen. Through the small window, I could see lights in the neighboring houses, normal families living normal lives, where the biggest worry was whether the lawn needed mowing or if the kids had finished their homework. I'd never had that luxury.
Even before the DEA, even before the undercover work, I'd been carrying secrets. The shoplifting arrest that everyone knew about. I'd been stealing formula for a neighbor's baby because her boyfriend had spent the grocery money on meth. The rehab stint that had branded me as an addict. I'd been gathering intelligence on a dealer who was selling to middle school kids, and the only way to get close was to look like I needed what he was selling. Every story they told about my failures was really a story about my choices. Choices to put other people's safety ahead of my own reputation. Choices to let myself be misunderstood rather than compromise an investigation or endanger an operation. But tonight, those choices had led cartel surveillance to my father's wake. Tonight, their assumptions about who I was had become a liability for everyone I loved. I opened the laundry room door and stepped back into the hallway. The wake was in full swing now. Someone had pulled out a guitar and was leading a soft rendition of Amazing Grace.
Spanish. The sound was beautiful and heartbreaking. Exactly the kind of send-off Dad would have wanted. I found Mateo in the kitchen, helping Mom organize the leftover food into containers for people to take home. He looked up when he saw me, that same expression of careful concern crossing his features. "Everything okay? You were on the phone for a while." "Fine, just work stuff." He exchanged a glance with Mom, who was pretending not to listen while she wrapped foil around a pan of enchiladas. "Work stuff?" "Yeah, nothing important." Mom finally looked at me directly for the first time since I'd arrived. "Clara, mija, what kind of work are you doing these days?" The question hung in the air between us, loaded with years of unspoken assumptions. She expected me to lie, to make up some story about temporary jobs or under-the-table work, or the kind of employment that people like me, people she thought I was, scraped together to survive. "It's complicated," I said, using Mateo's favorite word against him. "Everything's complicated with you," but she replied with less anger than she had been earlier, more exhaustion than accusation. "I just want to understand, Clara. I want to know why you disappeared, why you won't let us help you, why you show up looking like—" She gestured at my appearance, the same dismissive wave I'd been seeing for years. "Like what, Mom?" "Like you've been living rough, like you don't have anywhere to go or anyone to take care of you. What if I told you that's not true?" Mateo stepped closer, his accountant's mind probably trying to calculate the numbers that would make my situation add up to something other than failure. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if everything you think you know about me is wrong?" Mom's hands stilled on the foil she was folding. For the first time in years, I had their complete attention. "Then I'd say prove it," she said quietly, "because all we have to go on is what we see, Clara. And what we see is a daughter who disappeared from our lives, who won't tell us where she lives or what she does or why she can't come home for Christmas. What if I couldn't come home because it wasn't safe?" "Safe for who?" Mateo asked. I looked at both of them, these people who'd raised me and loved me and completely failed to understand me, and made a decision that would change everything. "Safe for you," I said. "What if I couldn't come home because the kind of work I do puts the people I love in danger?" Before either of them could respond, I heard the sound I'd been waiting for, the low rumble of heavy vehicles pulling up outside, followed by car doors slamming in quick succession. "What if," I continued, moving toward the front door, "I've been protecting you all this time?" The sound of approaching footsteps on the front porch made everyone in the house look toward the door. Through the frosted glass, I could see the silhouettes of at least 3 people, their movements deliberate and coordinated. The way conversations quieted as guests instinctively sensed something shifting in the atmosphere. But I wasn't ready yet. Not quite. There was something I needed to settle first. "Mom," I said, turning away from the door to face Marisol fully. "Before those people come in here, I need to know something. When you told Chief Alvarez that I was dangerous, that I might be unstable, did you really believe that? Or were you just trying to get rid of me?" Her face went pale. Around us, the remaining guests had gone completely silent,
pretending not to listen while hanging on every word. Clara, this isn't the time. No, this is exactly the time. Dad's gone. I might never get another chance to have this conversation with you. My voice was steady, but I could feel 8 years of buried hurt rising to the surface. So tell me, Marisol, do you really think your own daughter is dangerous? She glanced nervously at the front door, where the shadows were still waiting, then back at me. You're scaring me right now. The way you're talking, the way you're acting, I'm asking you a direct question, something I should have asked years ago. I took a step closer to her, and she instinctively stepped back. When I asked you for money last year, what did you think I was going to do with it? Clara, please.
What did you tell Mateo? What did you tell the neighbors? What story did you create about where that money was going? Mateo moved between us, his hands raised peacefully. Hey, let's all just take a breath. No. I kept my eyes locked on my mother's face. I want to hear her say it. I want to hear her tell me what she really thinks of the daughter she raised. Mom's composure finally cracked. Fine, you want the truth? I thought you'd spend it on drugs or gambling or whatever it is people like you spend money on when they're living on the streets. People like me. Yes, people like you. People who disappear for months at a time, who show up looking like they haven't showered in a week, who can't answer simple questions about where they live or what they do for work. Her voice was rising now, all the frustration and fear she'd been holding back for years spilling out. People who break their father's heart every Christmas when they don't come home, every birthday when they don't call, every family gathering where there's an empty chair because their youngest daughter is off doing God knows what with God knows who. The words hit like physical blows, but I forced myself to stay standing, to keep looking at her face. So yes, she continued, tears starting to track down her cheeks, when my daughter shows up asking for money and she's dressed like a vagrant and she won't look me in the eye, I assume the worst. Because what else am I supposed to think, Clara? What other explanation makes sense? You could have asked. I did ask. Every time I saw you, I asked how you were, where you were living, what you were doing for work. And every time you gave me some vague answer about it being complicated or temporary or none of my business. Because it wasn't what? Wasn't my business? I'm your mother, Clara. When your child is living on the streets, it becomes your business. When your child looks like they haven't eaten a decent meal in months, it becomes your business. When your child asks you for money and you know in your heart that giving it to them might kill them? She stopped abruptly, her hand flying to her mouth as if she could take the words back. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the footsteps on the porch had stopped, as if the people outside could sense the emotional devastation happening inside. You thought I was going to die, I said quietly. You thought I was killing myself slowly, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Her voice broke completely. I thought I was going to get a call from some hospital or police station telling me they'd found my daughter's body in an alley somewhere. Do you have any idea what that feels like, to love someone so much and watch them destroy themselves and know that trying to help them might actually make it worse? I stared at her, this woman who'd raised me, who taught me to stand up for myself, who'd worked double shifts to pay for my college textbooks. She'd been carrying this fear for years, this image of me as someone circling the drain, and I'd never known. Mom. Every night, Clara, every night I went to bed wondering if you were safe, if you were warm, if you were alive. And every morning I woke up afraid to check the news because what if this was the day they found you? The front door opened. I turned to see Chief Alvarez step inside, his hand resting on his service weapon, his expression a mixture of confusion and concern. Behind him were two people I recognized but had never expected to see in my childhood home. Special Agents Martinez and Chen, both wearing tactical vests with DEA emblazoned across their chest. Mrs. Torres, Chief Alvarez said carefully, we got reports of suspicious vehicles in the neighborhood. These federal agents asked to speak with you about... He stopped mid-sentence when he saw me. His eyes went from my face to the agents behind him, then back to me,
and I watched him try to process what he was seeing. "Clara?" he said uncertainly. Agent Martinez stepped forward, her voice crisp and professional. "We're looking for Special Agent Clara Torres. We have reason to believe she may be in danger." The room went completely still. I could feel every eye in the house focused on me. I could hear the exact moment when my mother's sharp intake of breath broke the silence. "Special Agent?" Mateo's voice was barely a whisper. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the leather credential case I'd been carrying for 8 years. With deliberate slowness, I flipped it open to reveal my badge and identification card.
"Special Agent Clara Torres, DEA," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the house. "And these are Agents Martinez and Chen, here to escort me back to a federal safe house because the drug cartel I've been investigating for the past 18 months has tracked me to this location." My mother's knees gave out. Mateo caught her before she hit the floor, but his eyes never left my badge. Chief Alvarez's mouth opened and closed without sound. And through the front door, I could see neighbors gathering on their porches, drawn by the sight of federal agents at the Torres house, their faces lit by curiosity and concern. "Mom," I said gently, kneeling down beside her chair, "I need you to listen very carefully. Those people you thought I was mixed up with, you were right, but not the way you think." The living room had transformed into something that felt more like a crime scene than a wake. Chief Alvarez stood frozen near the doorway, his hands still hovering near his weapon, while Agents Martinez and Chen flanked the entrance with the professional alertness of people trained to expect trouble. The remaining wake guests had pressed themselves against the far walls, their faces a mixture of shock and fascination. And in the center of it all sat my mother, staring at my badge like it was written in a foreign language. "This is impossible," she whispered. "Ma'am," Agent Martinez said respectfully, "I'm going to need everyone who isn't family to step outside while we secure the area." Chief Alvarez found his voice. "Secure the area? What kind of threat are we talking about here?" I stood up, keeping my badge visible, feeling the strange sensation of finally being seen as who I really was. The kind that involves cartel surveillance teams and the possibility that my cover has been blown. "Your cover?" Mateo's voice cracked on the words. "Clara, what the hell is going on?" Before I could answer, my secure phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID, Park, and held up a finger for silence. "Torres?" "Clara, we've got movement. The Escalade just pulled away, but the Honda's still there. 2 occupants, both armed. Local PD is setting up a perimeter, but we need to move you now." I looked around the room at the faces of my family, Mom still in shock, Mateo pale and confused, Chief Alvarez trying to process the fact that the girl he'd once driven home from juvie was now a federal agent. "Negative," I said into the phone. "I'm not running anymore. Clara, I'm not spending another minute hiding who I am from the people I love." I ended the call and turned to face the room. 8 years ago, I graduated from the DEA Academy at Quantico. For the past 18 months, I've been working undercover to infiltrate a Mexican cartel that's been trafficking fentanyl through Texas. The reason I couldn't come home for Christmas isn't because I was homeless or addicted or living in my car. It's because I was in deep cover, gathering intelligence on people who kill federal agents for sport. Mateo sank into Dad's red recliner, his face gray. "The money you asked for was part of my cover story. I needed to liquidate assets to maintain the appearance of being broke and desperate. The DEA reimbursed every penny. The way you looked at the wedding, at family gatherings. Wardrobe specialists, makeup artists, the same people who make sure undercover agents look like drug dealers or gang members or whatever role they need to play." I gestured at my current appearance. "This hoodie cost $800 and has more surveillance equipment sewn into it than most police departments own." Chief Alvarez stepped forward, his cop instincts finally overriding his shock. "Clara, Agent Torres, are you telling me that there are armed cartel members in my jurisdiction right now?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you, and they're here because of me." Mom finally spoke, her voice barely audible. "You've been a police officer this whole time?" "Not the police. DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration, federal agent."
I moved closer to her chair, crouching down so we were at eye level. Mom, remember when you used to tell me I could change the world? You were right. I did. Just not the way any of us expected. But you looked so... She reached out tentatively as if she wasn't sure I was real. So what? So broken? So lost? That was the point. Drug dealers don't trust successful-looking people. They trust people who look desperate, people who look like they need what they're selling.
The rehab, Mateo said suddenly. When you were 19? Undercover training. I was learning how to blend in with addicts, how to talk their language, and how to earn their trust. The arrest for shoplifting was part of my cover. I needed a juvenile record that would make me look like someone who'd made bad choices. Agent Chen's radio crackled to life. Unit 7 to command. The subject vehicle is moving. Repeat, Honda is moving toward the target location. The room tensed. Agent Martinez moved to the window, her hand on her weapon. Everyone stay calm, I said, standing up. Chen, what's our tactical situation? The perimeter is secure, SWAT is 2 minutes out, we can have you extracted in under 60 seconds if necessary. I looked at my family, really looked at them, maybe for the first time in years. Mom, who'd spent 8 years thinking I was killing myself with drugs when I'd actually been risking my life to keep drugs away from other people's children. Mateo, who'd offered me charity when I probably made more money than he did. Chief Alvarez, who'd seen me as a threat to public safety when I was actually part of the thin line that kept his community safe. No extraction, I said firmly. If they want to dance, we'll dance. But we do it here, where they can see exactly who they're dealing with. Clara, Mom said, struggling to her feet. I don't understand any of this, but if you're in danger... I've been in danger for 8 years, Mom. The difference is that now you know about it. I turned to Agent Martinez. I want full tactical gear. Vest, radio, the works. If there's going to be a confrontation, I want everyone to see exactly who Special Agent Clara Torres really is. Martinez hesitated. Agent Torres, protocol suggests that I've been undercover for too long and I'm compromised emotionally. Protocol also suggests that the best way to end a cartel surveillance operation is to show overwhelming force. I held her gaze steadily. Get me my gear. Agent Chen's radio crackled again. All units, be advised. The subject vehicle has stopped approximately 50 meters from the target location. 2 occupants remain inside. Through the front window, I could see neighbors on their porches, cell phones out, recording everything. Mrs. Garcia was standing in her front yard, probably trying to get a better view. The whole neighborhood was about to witness whatever happened next. Mom, I said, turning back to her, I need you to understand something. Everything you thought about me, every assumption you made, every story you told yourself about where I'd gone and what I'd become, it was all wrong. But it wasn't your fault. It was mine for letting you believe it. Why? Why would you let us think the worst? Because the worst was safer than the truth. Because if you'd known what I really did for a living, you would have worried even more. Because drug dealers don't just kill federal agents, they kill their families too. The weight of 8 years of secrecy hung in the air between us. Years of missed holidays and avoided phone calls and careful lies that had been designed to protect them, but instead had broken all our hearts. I'm sorry I let you suffer. I'm sorry I made you think you'd failed as a mother. I'm sorry Dad died thinking his daughter was a disappointment. He never thought that, Mateo said quietly. He used to say you were out there fighting battles the rest of us couldn't understand. We just thought he was making excuses for you. Agent Martinez returned with a tactical vest and radio. As I strapped on the gear, I could feel myself transforming from Clara the family disappointment into Special Agent Torres DEA. The weight of the vest, the crackle of the radio, the solid presence of my service weapon, these were the things that defined me, not the assumptions of people who'd never bothered to look deeper. Agent Torres, Chen called from the window, we've got movement. Both subjects are exiting the vehicle. I moved to the front door, my family clustering behind me, despite Agent Martinez's attempts to keep them back. Through the glass, I could see 2 men in dark clothing walking purposefully toward the house, their hands hidden inside their jackets. This is it, I said, checking my weapon one final time. Everyone's about to meet the real Clara Torres. I opened the front door and stepped out onto the porch. Badge visible, weapon drawn, federal agents flanked on every side.
DEA, I shouted, my voice carrying clearly through the neighborhood. The two men froze, clearly not expecting this level of federal response. Behind me, I could hear my mother gasp and could feel the shock rolling off the wake guests who'd followed us outside. This wasn't how anyone had expected the evening to end, but it was exactly how it needed to end, with the truth finally in the open for everyone to see.
Special Agent Clara Torres, I called out, making sure my voice reached every neighbor with a cell phone camera, every family member who'd ever doubted me, every person who'd ever made assumptions about who I was and what I was capable of. And you're under arrest. The two cartel operatives dropped to their knees with practiced efficiency, the kind of smooth compliance that told me they'd done this dance before. Professional criminals know when they're outgunned, and 3 federal agents with backup arriving by the second were definitely outgunned. Hands behind your head, fingers interlaced, Agent Martinez commanded, moving around to the left while Chen took the right flank. I kept my weapon trained on the taller suspect, the one whose jacket bulged in all the wrong places. The neighborhood had gone completely silent, except for the wail of approaching sirens. Every porch light was on now, every front door cracked open with curious faces peering out. Mrs. Garcia was standing in her driveway with her phone out, probably live streaming the whole thing to Facebook. "Clara?" My mother's voice came from directly behind me, small and uncertain. "Is this really happening?" "Stay back, Mom," I said without turning around. But inside, something warm unfurled in my chest at the sound of my name without pity attached to it, without that careful tone people use when they're talking to someone they think is broken. Chief Alvarez had found his professional footing again. "I've got units sealing off the perimeter," he called out, his radio crackling with chatter. "What do you need from the local PD?" "Secure transport for 2 federal prisoners," I replied, never taking my eyes off the suspects. "And crowd control. We're about to have half the news van in Austin pulling up to this address." The taller suspect looked up at me, his face a mixture of surprise and calculation. He'd been expecting to find a vulnerable target, maybe grab me from a dark parking lot or follow me to a secondary location. Instead, he'd walked into a federal operation with half the neighborhood watching. "You're Mariposa," he said in accented English. "Butterfly, my undercover code name for the past 18 months. "Not anymore," I said, pulling out zip tie restraints. "Now I'm the federal agent who's going to put your whole organization away." Agent Chen moved in for the arrest while Martinez kept overwatch. As the suspects were secured, I finally allowed myself to holster my weapon and turn around. The sight that greeted me was something I'd never expected to see. My entire family, plus half the wake guests, standing on the front porch with expressions of awe rather than shame. Mateo was looking like he was trying to solve a math problem in his head. Chief Alvarez was shaking his head slowly, probably recalculating every interaction he'd ever had with me. And Mom was crying, but for the first time in years, they didn't look like tears of disappointment. "Mija, you're really a federal agent." "I really am." I walked back toward the porch, pulling off my tactical gloves. "Have been for 8 years. And before you ask, yes, I'm good at it." Agent Martinez approached with her phone. "Park wants a debrief in 30 minutes. A full tactical team is en route to sweep the area for additional surveillance." I nodded, then looked back at my family clustered on the porch where we'd said goodbye to Dad just hours ago. The wake felt like it had happened in another lifetime. "Can you give me 10 minutes?" I asked Martinez. "I think I owe some people an explanation." We moved back into the living room, but everything felt different now. The same furniture, the same family photos on the walls, the same casserole dishes on the dining room table, but I was no longer the black sheep sneaking through the back door. I was Special Agent Clara Torres, with complete tactical vest and federal credentials. And my family was seeing me clearly for the first time in years. "I don't understand," Mateo said, settling heavily into Dad's recliner. "The money problems, the way you looked, the months of no contact, how was any of that fake?" It wasn't all fake. The isolation was real. Missing Christmas, missing Dad's birthday, missing every important moment. That part hurt as much as you thought it did. But it wasn't because I was strung out in some crack house.
It was because I was in federal custody giving testimony, or I was deep undercover and couldn't risk blowing my cover, or I was in a safe house because someone had put a price on my head. Mom was still staring at me like I might disappear if she blinked. The rehab when you were 19? Federal training facility. I was learning how to integrate with drug users, how to speak their language, and how to gain their trust. The shoplifting arrest was manufactured to give me a criminal background that would hold up under scrutiny. But you looked so sick at Cousin Maria's wedding, so thin, so tired.
Because I just spent 3 months living in a trap house in El Paso, eating nothing but gas station food and sleeping 4 hours a night while I gathered evidence on a trafficking ring that was moving heroin through elementary schools. I pulled off my tactical vest and set it carefully on the coffee table. The clothes weren't designer, homeless chic, Mom. They were the exact clothes I'd been living in for months, because maintaining that cover meant I couldn't just switch back to normal when I came home. Chief Alvarez leaned forward in his chair. Clara, Agent Torres, why didn't you tell me? I've known you since you were in pigtails. I could have helped, could have provided local support. Because the fewer people who knew, the safer everyone was, including you. I met his eyes steadily. Carlos, some of these operations go so deep that we can't risk local law enforcement knowing about them. Not because we don't trust you, but because corruption can happen anywhere, and one leaked name can get an agent killed. The room fell quiet, except for the distant sound of sirens and radio chatter from outside. Through the front window, I could see news vans starting to arrive, their satellite dishes rising against the Austin night sky. Your father, Mom said suddenly, her voice breaking. He knew, didn't he? I shook my head. Nobody knew. That was the hardest part, watching him worry about me, watching him make excuses for why I wasn't there, knowing he was proud of me, but not understanding why. He was proud of you, Mateo said quietly. Even when we didn't understand what you were doing, Dad always said you were fighting some battle we couldn't see. He was right. I looked around the room at these people who'd raised me and loved me and completely misunderstood me for years. I was fighting a battle, just not the one you thought. Agent Martinez appeared in the doorway. Agent Torres, we need that debrief, and the media situation is getting complicated. Someone leaked your real name to the press. I stood up, feeling the weight of 8 years of secrecy finally lifting from my shoulders. Give me 2 more minutes. She nodded and stepped back outside. So what happens now? Mom asked. Do you go back undercover? Do you disappear again? No more disappearing, I said firmly. My cover's blown, which means this phase of my career is over. But it also means I can finally have a relationship with my family that isn't built on lies and assumptions. Chief Alvarez was the first to break the emotional silence, his cop instincts kicking in even as he processed the personal revelation. The cases you worked on, how many people did you help? I thought about the question and really considered it. Operation Desert Storm resulted in 47 arrests and seized over $30 million in drug money. The El Paso investigation shut down a pipeline that was moving fentanyl to high schools across Texas. Last year's work in Denver? I paused, seeing their faces change as the scope of what I've been doing became real to them. We prevented about 200 kilograms of pure fentanyl from reaching the streets. That's enough to kill every person in Austin 3 times over. Mateo's face had gone pale. Jesus, Clara. And the danger? Mom's voice was barely a whisper. How many times were you almost killed? I finished gently. Honestly, Mom, I stopped counting. But that's not the point. The point is that every day I was out there meant kids in this neighborhood, kids in Mateo's neighborhood, kids all over Texas weren't getting poison sold to them by predators. Agent Martinez reappeared in the doorway, this time with more urgency. Agent Torres, Park's here. He needs to speak with you immediately. Through the front window, I could see my handler approaching the house, his face grim. Behind him, news crews were setting up their equipment, reporters checking their makeup and camera phone screens. "One more minute," I called Martinez, then turned back to my family. "Look, I know this is a lot to process. 8 years of thinking your daughter was a failure and then finding out she was actually a hero," Mom interrupted, her voice fierce and proud and completely different from any tone I'd heard from her in years. "You were a hero, and we treated you like you were broken. I let you think I was broken because it kept you safe. But I'm done with that now." I reached for her hands, finding them warm and steady for the first time all evening. "Mija," she said, tears streaming down her face. "All those years you thought what any mother would think when her daughter shows up looking like she's been living rough and asking for money. You did what you thought was right." Mateo stood up and pulled me into a hug that felt different from any embrace we'd shared since we were kids. "I keep thinking about all the times I offered you help, like you were some charity case. God, Clara, you probably make more money than I do."
Probably, I admitted, smiling for the first time in hours. Federal agents get decent salaries, plus hazard pay, plus undercover allowances. I own a condo in Denver and a cabin in Colorado. I'm doing fine financially. Then why did you let us think? Because operational security was more important than my ego. Because protecting my cover meant protecting my life. And protecting my life meant I could keep doing the job. I looked around the room one more time, at the family photos and Dad's empty chair and the remnants of a wake that had turned into something none of us could have imagined. But that job is over now. My cover's blown, which means it's time to figure out who Clara Torres is when she's not pretending to be someone else. Park's voice carried through the front door. "Agent Torres, we really need to move on this." "I have to go," I said reluctantly. "There's going to be paperwork and debriefings and probably congressional testimony. But Mom, next weekend, if you want, maybe I could come back. As for myself this time." She nodded, still crying, still looking at me like she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. "Will you stay for dinner? Will you tell us about your work?" "All of it," I promised. "The real stories, not the cover stories. And maybe you can tell me what I missed while I was gone." As I headed toward the door, Mateo called after me. "Clara, Dad would have been proud, not just of what you did, but of how you carried it alone all these years." I turned back one last time, looking at the people who'd raised me and loved me and finally understood me. I didn't carry it alone. I carried it for you. Dawn was breaking over Austin as I stood beside the DEA SUV, watching my mother through the front window. She was cleaning up the remnants of Dad's wake, but she kept looking toward the door as if making sure I was still there. "Ready?" Park asked, keys in hand. I looked back at the house one final time. No more lies, no more assumptions. Just a family who finally knew who I really was. "Next weekend," I called Mom through the window. "I'll bring pictures from Denver." She pressed her hand to the glass and smiled. For the first time in 8 years, I was going home as myself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss an upload from us.